Picture this. It's a warm November evening in Miami. You're stepping onto a cruise ship, the SS Yarmouth Castle, getting ready for a perfect weekend escape to Nassau. The mood is just electric, total holiday vibes. But in the middle of the night, out on the calm, dark sea, that beautiful scene is about to become a full-blown inferno. This would become one of the worst maritime disasters in modern North American history. 90 people who boarded for a vacation, they're never coming home. So what happened? How did this dream trip turn into an absolute nightmare? All right, so let's set this scene here. It's November 12th, 1965. The Yarmouth Castle pulls away from Miami. On board, you've got 376 passengers and 176 crew, all just buzzing with excitement. They're all thinking they'll wake up the next morning to that beautiful Nassau sunshine. But then, just after 1 o'clock in the morning, deep inside the ship, a fire starts smoldering in a little room, room 610. Now, this wasn't a guest room. It was basically a storage closet, and it was stuffed with things that love to burn. Old mattresses, spare chairs, and cans of paint. And the worst part? There was no sprinkler system in there. Not one. A tiny spark had just found the perfect nursery to grow into a monster. Now, look, a fire on any ship is bad news. But this one, it went from a spark to a catastrophe almost instantly. And to really get why, you've got to look at the ship itself. The Yarmouth Castle, it wasn't just a ship. It was a floating tinderbox, and it had been for years. I mean, this thing was a ticking time bomb. It was built way back in 1927, so it's nearly 40 years old at this point. And its big, grand upper decks weren't made of steel like a modern ship. Nope, they were made of wood. And over the years, that wood got covered in so many layers of flammable paint that the crew actually had a joke that the ship was just being held together by paint. On top of that, it was always breaking down. This ship wasn't just old, it was an accident waiting for a place to happen. So you're probably thinking, how on earth could a ship like this be sailing out of a U.S. port? Well, the answer comes down to something called a flag of convenience. You see, the Yarmouth Castle wasn't registered in the U.S. It was registered in Panama. And doing that let the owners get around America's tougher safety laws, hire a cheaper crew, and basically just cut corners to save money. It was a loophole, and it was about to have absolutely devastating consequences. Okay, so you've got a fire starting on an old wooden ship that's covered in flammable paint and has no real safety features. The situation just exploded. The ship's own ventilation system, which is supposed to move fresh air around, started acting like a giant bellows, feeding oxygen to the fire and turning hallways into horrifying wind tunnels of flame and smoke. And here's the truly unbelievable part. Every single safety system failed. The fire alarms, they never went off. The sprinkler system never turned on. When the crew grabbed the fire hoses to try and fight the blaze, there was no water pressure. One of the hoses had actually been cut. The ropes for the lifeboats were so caked with years of paint that they were literally fused in place. And then, the final blow. The ship's radio operator was overcome by smoke and fire before he could send out a single SOS call. They were on their own, on a burning ship, and everything that could possibly go wrong did. Just look at this timeline. It shows you how fast the chaos took over. Around 1 a.m., the fire breaks out. Just 25 minutes later, the captain orders abandon ship, but he doesn't sound a general alarm. Most of the passengers are asleep and have no idea what's happening. Then, 20 minutes after that, the ship's only motorized lifeboat is launched. And who's on it? The captain and his senior officers. They were leaving. It took another nearby freighter, the Finnpulp, to see the flames on the horizon and finally radio the Coast Guard. By just after 6 a.m., the Yarmouth Castle gave one last groan, slipped beneath the waves, and was gone forever. They say in a crisis, you see the best and the worst of people. And the Yarmouth Castle fire, wow. It's a story of shocking cowardice, right alongside some of the most incredible heroism you can imagine. The choices made in just a few short hours defined everybody. When the first rescue ships arrived, one of the first things they found was a half-empty lifeboat. Inside were Captain Byron Voutsinas and his top officers. They had abandoned their ship, their crew, and hundreds of passengers to fend for themselves. This single act was later called, and I'm quoting here, possibly the greatest act of maritime cowardice in recent times. I mean, the contrast here is just staggering. While the captain was running away, the crews of 2 other ships, the passenger liner SS Bahama Star and that freighter, the Finnpulp, they saw the flames and sailed full speed right into the danger zone. They weren't Coast Guard, they weren't required to. They just saw people in trouble and went to help, pulling hundreds of survivors from the burning deck and the dark water. And what they pulled off was, well, it was nothing short of a miracle. The Bahama Star and the Finnpulp together saved 465 people. These were just regular sailors on regular ships, and their crews showed extraordinary bravery that night. But even their amazing courage couldn't save everybody. When it was all over and the names were counted, 90 people were lost, 88 passengers and 2 members of the crew. A weekend cruise had ended in a watery grave. So why are we talking about this tragedy that happened so long ago? Because the fire that destroyed the Yarmouth Castle actually ignited a revolution in safety at sea. Its legacy is something that protects millions of us who travel by ship even today. This whole disaster was a massive, brutal wake-up call for the entire shipping industry. It forced major updates to the most important set of maritime safety rules in the world, the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, usually just called SOLAS. And the changes were really specific, hitting on every single thing that went wrong. First, because the Yarmouth Castle was made of wood, the rules now say that any ship carrying more than 50 people has to be built from steel and other materials that don't burn. Second, because every safety system failed, there are now way stricter international rules for inspections, for crew training, and for fire drills. And finally, to shut down that deadly flag of convenience loophole, any foreign ship that wants to pick up passengers in an American port has to prove it meets all these tough new safety standards. No more exceptions. The story of the Yarmouth Castle is such a powerful reminder that so many of the safety rules we just take for granted today were written in the wake of terrible tragedies. The changes that came from this one fire have, without a doubt, saved countless lives. And it leaves you with a really important question to think about. What other lessons from the past, lessons that were paid for at such a high price, might we be in danger of forgetting?